An 8-year-old boy stands in Judge Frank Caprio's courtroom. The charges? Grand theft auto. 5 times in 3 months. But when the judge asks why, the boy pulls out a folder stuffed with handwritten notes, DMV records, and a photograph. "I'm looking for my mother," he says. "And I think you knew her." The courtroom goes silent. Judge Caprio's hand freezes midair, his gavel suspended above the bench. His face, usually warm and compassionate, drains of color as he stares at the photograph the boy is holding up. It's a picture from 1995. A young woman with dark hair and kind eyes, standing outside Providence Municipal Court. And beside her in the photograph, barely visible but unmistakable, is a much younger Frank Caprio in his first year as a judge. "Where did you get that?" Judge Caprio whispers, his voice cracking in a way the court staff has never heard before. The boy, small for his age, wearing an oversized donated hoodie and sneakers held together with duct tape, looks directly at the judge with eyes far too old for his face. "From the library archives," the boy says calmly as if explaining something obvious. "I've been researching for 2 years. I've read 1,847 court documents. I've memorized 3,456 DMV records. I've tracked 127 possible leads. And Judge Caprio, this photograph is the first connection I've found between my mother and anyone who's still alive." Nobody in that Providence courtroom knew they were about to witness the most complex, heartbreaking, and ultimately transformative case of Judge Caprio's 40-year career. A case that would force him to confront a decision he made in 1995, a decision he thought was right, a decision that haunted him every year on the anniversary date, a decision that apparently destroyed the life of a woman he once tried to help. And now, 29 years later, her son had found him. The morning of November 8, 2024, began like any other Thursday in Providence Municipal Court. Judge Frank Caprio arrived at precisely 7:30 a.m., carrying his worn leather briefcase and a coffee from the Italian bakery on Federal Hill that he'd been visiting for 37 years. Maria Santos, his court clerk, was already at her desk reviewing the day's docket. She looked up as Judge Caprio entered, and something in her expression made him pause. "Morning, Maria. Something wrong?" Maria held up a case file with a yellow sticky note on the front, their office code for unusual circumstances. "Judge, we've got a juvenile case this morning that's, well, it's bizarre. 8-year-old boy. Multiple counts of unauthorized use of a motor vehicle. But get this, he doesn't actually steal the cars. He borrows them, drives them for a few hours, then returns them to the exact same spot with full gas tanks and handwritten apology notes." Judge Caprio set down his briefcase, intrigued. In 40 years on the bench, he'd seen thousands of car theft cases. But this was new. An 8-year-old? How does an 8-year-old know how to drive? "That's the bizarre part," Maria continued, opening the file. "According to the police reports, he taught himself using YouTube videos and library books on automotive operation. The officers who caught him said he was actually a better driver than most adults, obeyed all traffic laws, used turn signals, stayed under the speed limit." Judge Caprio picked up the file, scanning the details. "Marcus Chin. Age 8. Currently in foster care with the Williams family in Cranston. 5 separate incidents over 3 months. September 15th. Borrowed a 2018 Honda Civic belonging to Patricia Morrison. Returned it 4 hours later with a full tank and a note saying, 'Sorry. I needed to check East Providence.' September 29th. Borrowed a 2020 Toyota Camry belonging to David Reynolds. Returned it 3 hours later with a note, 'Sorry again. Had to verify an address in Warwick.' October 12th. Borrowed a 2019 Ford Escape belonging to Jennifer Wu. Returned with note, 'Getting closer. Sorry for the inconvenience.' October 26th. Borrowed a 2021 Subaru Outback belonging to Thomas DeLuca. Returned with note, 'Wrong person. Sorry. I filled your tank.' November 5th. Borrowed a 2017 Honda Accord belonging to Michael Caprio. Judge Caprio stopped reading. His hand trembled slightly as he held the page. "Maria, did you say one of the vehicles belonged to Michael Caprio?" Maria nodded. "Any relation?" "My nephew," Judge Caprio said quietly. "My sister Joyce's son. Why didn't Michael tell me about this?" "According to the police report, your nephew declined to press charges. Said the kid returned the car with a full tank and seemed more lost than criminal. But when the police connected it to the other incidents, they arrested the boy anyway." Judge Caprio sat down heavily in his chair. An 8-year-old borrowing cars, returning them with apology notes. And one of those cars belonged to his nephew. That couldn't be coincidence. Where's the boy now? Being held in juvenile detention pending this hearing. His foster parents are in the courtroom, the Williamses. They're at their wits' end. Say Marcus is brilliant but obsessive. Won't tell them why he keeps taking cars. Won't talk to social workers. Only said he'd explain everything to the judge. Judge Caprio looked at the photograph clipped to the file. Marcus Chin stared back at him from the intake photo, a small Asian American boy with dark hair, oversized glasses, and eyes that carried far too much knowledge for someone who should still believe in Santa Claus. Something about those eyes nagged at Judge Caprio. Something familiar. Has anyone investigated why he's taking these specific cars? Judge Caprio asked. There must be a pattern. Maria shrugged. The police looked into it. The 5 car owners have nothing obvious in common. Different ages, different neighborhoods, different occupations. The only connection they could find is that all 5 vehicles were registered within the last 6 years. Registered, Judge Caprio repeated thoughtfully. So he's tracking vehicle registrations. But why? The boy won't say. Just keeps insisting he needs to talk to the judge. Judge Caprio looked at his docket. 73 cases scheduled for the day. But something told him Marcus Chen's case would take longer than the 10 minutes typically allocated for juvenile vehicle offenses. Move his case to first thing after the morning recess, Judge Caprio instructed. And Maria? Pull everything you can find on Marcus Chen. Foster care records, school records, medical records if we're authorized. I want to understand this boy before he walks into my courtroom. Maria nodded and left. Judge Caprio sat alone in his chambers, staring at the photograph of 8-year-old Marcus Chen. Those eyes. Why did those eyes look so familiar? But Judge Caprio couldn't shake the feeling that Marcus Chen's case was more than just another juvenile offense. And when Maria returned 30 minutes later with the boy's file, she brought information that would make the judge's blood run cold. Because Marcus Chen wasn't just borrowing random cars. He was following a pattern that connected directly to a case Judge Caprio had presided over in 1995. A case he'd never forgotten. A case that still haunted him. Maria Santos returned to Judge Caprio's chambers carrying a thick folder and wearing an expression he'd rarely seen in 28 years of working together. Deep concern mixed with confusion. Judge, you need to see this. Marcus Chen's background is complicated, doesn't begin to cover it. She spread documents across his desk. Judge Caprio began reading, and with each page the picture became clearer and more heartbreaking. Birth certificate. Name, Marcus Chen. Date of birth, March 15, 2016. Mother, Sarah Chen, age 24 at time of birth. Father, unknown. Hospital, Rhode Island Hospital, Providence. Social Services Report, June 2019. Marcus Chen, age 3, was found alone in apartment at 245 Waterman Street, Providence. Mother Sarah Chen had not been seen for 72 hours. Neighbors reported hearing child crying. Police forced entry. Found child dehydrated but otherwise healthy. No signs of abuse. Apartment contained adequate food and supplies. Mother's belongings present, suggesting unplanned departure. Vehicle registered to Sarah Chen, 2015 Honda Civic, RI license WX7452, not in parking lot. Missing person report filed. Child placed in emergency foster care pending investigation. Missing person report Sarah Chen. Last seen June 14, 2019, approximately 11:30 p.m., leaving work at Providence General Hospital where she worked as a night shift janitor. Vehicle found abandoned June 18, 2019, in parking lot of Warwick Mall. Keys in ignition. Purse with wallet, ID and $47 cash still in vehicle. Phone found on front seat, battery dead. No signs of struggle. Security footage shows Sarah Chen parking vehicle at 1:15 a.m. on June 15, exiting vehicle, and walking toward Route 2. No further sightings. Judge Caprio felt something cold settle in his stomach. She just vanished, he said quietly. Left her car, her purse, everything. And her 3-year-old son alone in an apartment. It gets stranger, Maria continued, pulling out another document. Look at the timeline. Sarah Chen had no history of mental illness, substance abuse, or irresponsible behavior. By all accounts, she was a devoted mother. Worked double shifts to support Marcus. Kept the apartment spotless. Never missed a doctor's appointment for her son. Then why would she abandon him? That's what Marcus has been trying to figure out for 5 years, Maria said. Look at his foster care records. Judge Caprio flipped through the pages. Foster placement number 1, Johnson family, 2019 to 2020. Marcus is a quiet, intelligent child who rarely speaks. Shows signs of trauma but is cooperative with caregivers. Recently discovered reading police procedural books from local library. Expressed interest in finding mama. Reassured that social workers are looking for his mother. Foster placement number 2, Martinez family, 2020 to 2021. Marcus has become increasingly focused on his mother's disappearance. Spends hours at library reading old newspapers and public records. Has memorized missing persons cases from 2019. Asking sophisticated questions about police investigations. Recommended for counseling to address obsessive behavior. Foster placement number 3, Thompson family, 2021 to 2022. Marcus caught attempting to access police database using library computer. Explained he was following leads about his mother. When asked what leads, he showed notebook containing detailed timeline of Sarah Chen's last known movements, list of people she may have known, and analysis of security footage descriptions. At age 6, this child has conducted more thorough investigation than most adults. Concerning but also remarkable. Foster placement number 4, Davis family, 2022 to 2023. Marcus expelled from elementary school for hacking into administrative database to access old student records. Claims he was looking for information about his mother's childhood in Providence. School administrators disturbed by his technical abilities. Psychological evaluation recommended. Psychological evaluation, DR. Patricia Morrison, child psychologist. Marcus Chin presents as exceptionally gifted child with IQ tested at 156, 99.9th percentile. Exhibits signs of complex trauma related to mother's disappearance but has channeled this into productive investigative behavior. His obsession with finding his mother is both a coping mechanism and a demonstration of remarkable cognitive abilities. However, his social development is severely delayed. He struggles to form attachments with foster families, viewing them as temporary obstacles to his primary mission, finding Sarah Chen. Recommends specialized placement with family who can support both his intellectual needs and emotional trauma. Current placement, Williams family, 2023 present. Tom and Rachel Williams are experienced foster parents specializing in gifted children. Initially, placement seemed successful. Marcus enrolled in advanced program at Wheeler School, excelling academically. However, foster parents report he spends every free moment at library, has filled 3 notebooks with research about his mother, and recently began asking questions about how to access DMV records. Judge Caprio set down the last document, his hands trembling slightly. He's 8 years old, he said quietly, and he spent 5 years, more than half his life, trying to find his mother. There's more, Maria said hesitantly. I did some searching through our archives. Judge, do you remember a case from 1995? A young woman named Sarah Morrison? Judge Caprio looked up sharply. Sarah Morrison? That name sounds familiar, but... Maria pulled out a faded case file from the bottom of the stack. Sarah Morrison, age 18. Came before you in October 1995 on charges of prostitution and drug possession. First offense. You dismissed the charges and mandated she enter a rehabilitation program instead of jail time. Judge Caprio took the file and memories came flooding back. Yes, he remembered her. A terrified 18-year-old girl who'd been picked up in a sting operation. She'd been sobbing in his courtroom, begging for a chance to turn her life around. He'd seen something in her that day, genuine remorse, genuine desire to change. So he dismissed the charges and ordered her into a program. 6 months later, she'd returned to his courtroom to thank him. She'd completed rehab, gotten her GED, enrolled in community college. She'd turned her life around. I remember her, Judge Caprio said softly. But what does Sarah Morrison have to do with? He stopped mid-sentence as Maria pulled out one more document. Birth certificate correction form, filed 2017, Maria said. Sarah Morrison legally changed her name to Sarah Chen after marrying David Chen in 2016. The marriage lasted 6 months. David Chen left before Marcus was born. Sarah kept the name Chin but resumed using her maiden name Morrison in some contexts. Judge Caprio's hands went cold. Sarah Morrison. Sarah Chin. They're the same person. The woman you helped in 1995, Maria confirmed. The woman who disappeared in 2019, leaving her 3-year-old son alone. The woman Marcus has been searching for ever since. Judge Caprio stared at the documents, his mind racing. The young woman he'd given a second chance to in 1995 had turned her life around, had a son, worked hard to support him, and then vanished without a trace, leaving that son to spend 5 years desperately searching for her. And now that son was in his courtroom, accused of stealing cars as part of his search. "Maria," Judge Caprio said slowly, "you said Marcus borrowed my nephew Michael's car. Why Michael specifically?" Maria pulled out another document, a printout from what appeared to be a library database. This was in Marcus's belongings when he was arrested. It's a family tree he created. Look at the name at the top. Judge Caprio looked at the handwritten diagram. At the top, in careful child's handwriting, Sarah Morrison, helped by Judge F. Caprio, 1995. Below that, lines connecting to various names. And one of those names, Michael Caprio, nephew of Judge. Vehicle registration, 2017 Honda Accord. "He's been mapping everyone connected to you," Maria said quietly. "Everyone connected to the judge who helped his mother 29 years ago. He's trying to find anyone who might know where she went." Judge Caprio felt the weight of 40 years on the bench settle onto his shoulders like a physical burden. An 8-year-old boy, brilliant and broken, had been searching for his mother for 5 years. And that search had led him to steal cars, commit crimes, and ultimately end up in the courtroom of the one man who'd helped his mother long before he was born. "When does court convene?" Judge Caprio asked. 20 minutes. Clear my afternoon schedule. This case is going to take time." Maria nodded and left. Judge Caprio sat alone in his chambers, staring at the photograph from 1995, young Sarah Morrison standing outside this very courthouse, hope alive in her eyes because a judge had given her a second chance. And now her son was here, hoping for the same thing. Judge Caprio thought he understood the case now. A boy searching for his missing mother. But what nobody knew, not Maria, not the foster parents, not even Marcus himself, was that Sarah Morrison hadn't simply vanished. She'd left a letter with Judge Caprio's law clerk in 2019, 3 days before she disappeared. A letter Judge Caprio had never opened because he'd been on medical leave. A letter that sat in a sealed envelope in his personal files for 5 years. A letter he was about to open for the first time. Judge Caprio stood in front of his filing cabinet, his hand hovering over the drawer marked, "Personal Correspondence Archived." He'd remembered it as soon as Maria mentioned Sarah Morrison's disappearance in 2019. A letter had been delivered to the courthouse that June, addressed to him personally. His clerk at the time had left it on his desk, but he'd been in the hospital recovering from emergency heart surgery. By the time he returned to work 3 weeks later, the letter had been filed away, and in the chaos of catching up with the backlog of cases, he'd forgotten about it. Until now. His hands shook as he opened the drawer and rifled through files. There, a sealed manila envelope, postmarked June 14, 2019, the day before Sarah Chen had vanished. The day before she'd left her car in a parking lot and walked into the night, never to be seen again. Judge Caprio opened the envelope with trembling fingers. Inside was a handwritten letter, 3 pages, written in neat, careful handwriting that spoke of someone who'd taken their time, someone who'd known these might be their last words. He began to read. "Dear Judge Caprio, you won't remember me. Or maybe you will. You changed my life 24 years ago, so perhaps I made an impression. I'm Sarah Morrison. Or I was Sarah Morrison when you knew me. I'm Sarah Chen now, though the man who gave me that name left before our son was born. In 1995, I was 18 years old and standing in your courtroom, terrified and ashamed. I'd been arrested for prostitution and drug possession. It was my first offense, but I knew how the system worked. Girls like me didn't get second chances. We got criminal records and jail time and a future of more prostitution and more drugs because once you're in the system, you never really get out. But you looked at me that day, really looked at me. You asked me questions. You listened to my answers. And when I told you I wanted to change, you believed me. You dismissed the charges. You mandated rehab instead of jail. You gave me the second chance I didn't deserve. I want you to know what happened with that second chance. I completed the 6-month rehab program. I got my GED. I enrolled at Community College of Rhode Island. I studied hard. I worked 3 jobs to pay for school. In 1999, I graduated with an associate's degree in early childhood education. I wanted to work with kids because I remembered what it was like to be a kid with no one to believe in you. I got a job at a daycare center in Providence. I was good at it. The kids loved me and I loved them. For the first time in my life, I felt like I belonged somewhere. In 2015, I met David Chin. He was kind. He made me laugh. We got married too fast, I know that now. But I was 38 and lonely and tired of being alone. 6 months later, I was pregnant. 6 months after that, David was gone. He left me a note saying he wasn't ready to be a father. Wasn't ready for the responsibility. He took half our savings and disappeared. I won't lie and say I was okay. I wasn't. I cried for a week. But then something amazing happened. Marcus was born. Judge Caprio, I have never known love like I felt the moment I held my son. He was perfect. He was mine. And for the first time since I was a child myself, I felt hope. I named him Marcus after my grandfather, the only person in my childhood who'd ever been kind to me. I quit the daycare center because the pay wasn't enough to support us. I took a job as a night janitor at Providence General Hospital. The hours were terrible, but the pay was better and the health insurance was good. I worked 11 p.m. to 7 a.m., slept while Marcus was at daycare, picked him up in the afternoon, spent every waking moment with him. He was special, Judge Caprio. By age 2 he was reading. By age 3 he was doing math that kindergartners struggled with. His daycare teachers said they'd never seen anything like him. I should have been happy. I had a job. I had an apartment. I had the most incredible son in the world. I turned my life around exactly like you'd believed I could 24 years ago. But here's the truth I never told anyone. I never really recovered from my addiction. Oh, I stayed clean for 24 years. I never touched drugs again after that day in your courtroom. But addiction isn't just about the drugs, it's about what the drugs were covering up. And I never dealt with that. The trauma. The abuse from my childhood. The years of men treating me like an object. The shame. The self-hatred. The certainty deep in my bones that I didn't deserve good things. I managed it. I pushed it down. I focused on Marcus, on being the mother he deserved. But it was always there, whispering in the darkness, "You're not good enough. You're going to fail him. You're going to ruin his life like you ruin everything." And then, 6 months ago, something happened that I can't talk about. Something that proved all those whispers right. I did something terrible. Something criminal. Something that, if discovered, would send me to prison for a very long time. I won't tell you what it was. I can't. But I need you to know, I did it to protect Marcus. Someone was threatening him, threatening to hurt him, and I did what I had to do to keep him safe. But now, Judge Caprio, I'm being investigated. The police are asking questions. It's only a matter of time before they figure out what I did. And when they arrest me, what happens to Marcus? He'll go into the foster system. He'll be shuffled between families who won't understand how special he is. He'll grow up thinking his mother abandoned him, or worse, that his mother is a criminal. I can't let that happen. So I'm writing you this letter because 24 years ago, you believed in me when no one else did. And I need to believe that you'll help my son when I can't be there anymore. By the time you read this, I'll be gone. I haven't decided exactly how yet, but I know I can't stay. If I disappear, the investigation might stall. They might stop looking. Marcus will be safe. Please, Judge Caprio, if my son ever comes before you, remember that he is the product of the second chance you gave me. He's proof that redemption is possible. He's everything good that came from your mercy 24 years ago. Take care of him. Believe in him. Give him the chance to become everything I couldn't be. I'm sorry I couldn't be stronger. I'm sorry I'm leaving him. But I love him more than anything in this world, and this is the only way I know to keep him safe. Thank you for changing my life in 1995. Thank you for making it possible for Marcus to exist. He's the best thing I ever did. Please help him. Sarah Morrison Chin. June 14, 2019. Judge Caprio's hands shook as he finished reading. The letter fell from his fingers onto his desk. Sarah Morrison hadn't abandoned her son because she didn't love him. She disappeared because she thought it was the only way to protect him from whatever she'd done, from whatever she was being investigated for. She'd sacrificed herself to save her child. And for 5 years, that child had been searching for her, never knowing that she'd left on purpose, never knowing that she'd done it out of love. Judge Caprio pressed the intercom button. "Maria, I need you to pull every police report from June 2019 related to Sarah Chin or Sarah Morrison. Investigations, incidents, anything. And I need them before the hearing starts." "Judge, that's in 15 minutes. "Then we have 15 minutes. Please, Maria. This is important." He sat back in his chair, staring at Sarah's letter. 24 years ago, he'd given a terrified 18-year-old girl a second chance, and she'd used it to build a life. She'd gotten clean, gotten educated, gotten a job, raised an incredible son. And then something had happened, something that terrified her so much she'd rather disappear than face it, rather leave her son orphaned than let him see her arrested. What could possibly be worth that sacrifice? And more importantly, was Sarah Morrison Chin still alive? Judge Caprio thought Sarah Morrison had vanished to protect her son from whatever crime she'd committed. But the police reports Maria was about to deliver would reveal something far more sinister. Sarah hadn't been investigated for something she'd done. She'd been running from someone who'd been searching for her for 24 years. Someone who'd finally found her. Someone who had every reason to make her disappear. Maria Santos burst back into Judge Caprio's chambers carrying a thick folder of police reports. Her face was pale. "Judge, you need to read this. All of it. Before that boy walks into your courtroom." Judge Caprio took the folder. The first document was a police report dated May 15, 2019, 1 month before Sarah Chen's disappearance. Providence Police Department, report hashtag 2019-05-8842. Reporting officer, Det. Michael Torres. Incident, stalking/harassment complaint. Complainant, Sarah Chin DOB March 12, 1977. Statement, Chin reports that over the past 3 weeks she has observed the same vehicle, dark blue sedan, unable to identify make/model, parked outside her workplace, Providence General Hospital, on multiple occasions. Vehicle appears around midnight and leaves around 2 a.m. Driver remains in vehicle but appears to be watching the hospital entrance. Chin states she believes she is being followed but has no enemies or former partners who would have reason to surveil her. When asked if there are any individuals from her past who might seek to locate her, Chin became evasive and declined to provide further information. Action taken. Increased patrols in area. Chin advised to contact police immediately if she observes vehicle again. Judge Caprio's blood ran cold. Sarah had been followed in the weeks before her disappearance. He flipped to the next report. Providence Police Department, report hashtag 2019-05-9103. Reporting officer, Det. Michael Torres. Incident, follow-up to stalking complaint. Date, May 22, 2019. Sarah Chin contacted department to report that dark sedan was observed again outside her apartment building, 245 Waterman Street, at approximately 3 a.m. Chin states she observed from window and saw driver exit vehicle briefly. Driver appeared to be male, approximately 6 foot, wearing dark clothing. Driver took photograph of apartment building, then returned to vehicle and departed. Chin extremely agitated. When pressed again about possible suspects, she mentioned someone from a long time ago, but refused to elaborate. Stated she would handle it herself. Officer's note, Chin's behavior suggests she knows who is following her but is afraid to identify them. Recommended continued investigation. Judge Caprio's hands trembled as he turned to the next document. Providence Police Department, report hashtag 2019-06-02. Reporting officer, Det. Michael Torres. Incident, threat/intimidation. Chin contacted emergency services at 11:47 p.m. reporting that she received anonymous text message on her phone. Message read, "I know where you are. I know about your son. We need to talk about what you did 24 years ago." Chin refused to come to station, refused to identify who might have sent message. Stated only, "This is about something that happened when I was 18. Someone wants revenge." When asked what happened 24 years ago, Chin ended call. Follow-up attempts to contact Chin unsuccessful. Attempted home visit June 3, 19, no answer at apartment. Judge Caprio felt sick. Sarah had been targeted by someone from her past. Someone who knew about something that happened in 1995, the same year she'd appeared in his courtroom. He kept reading. Providence Police Department, report hashtag 2019-06-11. Reporting officer, Det. Michael Torres. Incident, break-in at 245 Waterman Street, apartment 3B, Sarah Chin residence. Chin contacted police at 8:15 a.m. to report that someone had entered her apartment during the night while she and her son were sleeping. Nothing stolen, but items had been moved. Personal documents had been searched through. Photograph of her son left on kitchen counter with note, "Beautiful boy. Would be a shame if something happened to him." *MS. Chin. Chin visibly terrified but still refusing to identify possible suspect. Stated, "You can't protect us from this person. No one can. They have connections. They have power. If I tell you who they are, it will only make things worse." Child Protective Services contacted due to potential threat to minor child, Marcus Chin, age 3. Chin assured CPS she would take protective measures. Refused offer of protective custody. Officer's note, Chin appears to be protecting someone or afraid of retaliation. Behavior consistent with domestic violence victim, but she denies any current or former intimate partner involvement. Judge Caprio flipped to the final document in the stack, a missing person investigation summary dated July 2019, 1 month after Sarah's disappearance. Providence Police Department, missing person investigation. Subject, Sarah Morrison Chin. Lead investigator, Det. Michael Torres. Summary, despite extensive investigation, no leads in disappearance of Sarah Chin. Subject's vehicle found abandoned at Warwick Mall with all personal belongings inside. Security footage shows subject parking vehicle at 1:15 a.m. on June 15, 2019, exiting vehicle, and walking toward Route 2. Subject appears calm, not distressed. Key findings. Bank account untouched since disappearance. Phone records show no calls/texts after 11:30 p.m. June 14. No activity on social media accounts. Son, Marcus Chin, age 3, found alone in apartment 72 hours after disappearance. Apartment showed no signs of struggle. Subject had been receiving threats in weeks prior to disappearance but refused to identify source. Theory, subject may have left voluntarily due to threats against herself and/or her child. Alternative theory, subject may have been abducted by unknown suspect who had been stalking her. Case remains open. No body recovered. Subject presumed deceased as of June 2024, 5-year anniversary of disappearance. Note, in 2023, subject's son Marcus Chin, then age 7, contacted department requesting access to mother's case file. Request denied due to age and sensitivity of information. Child demonstrated unusual knowledge of investigative procedures and asked specific questions about evidence collection that suggested he had been studying police methodology. Judge Caprio set down the reports, his mind racing. Sarah Morrison had been stalked, threatened, and terrorized in the weeks before she disappeared. Someone from her past, someone from 24 years ago, had found her and wanted revenge for something. And then she'd vanished, leaving her 3-year-old son alone, presumably to protect him from whoever was after her. But who? And revenge for what? Judge Caprio thought back to 1995. Sarah Morrison had been arrested for prostitution and drug possession. A first offense. Young, scared, desperate for a second chance. He dismissed the charges and sent her to rehab instead of jail. Standard procedure. Compassionate sentencing. Nothing controversial. Unless someone had been angry that she'd escaped punishment. Someone who'd wanted her to go to jail. Someone who'd been waiting 24 years for another chance at revenge. There was a soft knock on his door. Maria entered, her expression grim. Judge, I did some more digging. I found the original arrest report from 1995. The one that brought Sarah Morrison to your courtroom. She handed him a faded police report. Providence Police Department, report hashtag 1995-10-2847. Reporting officer, Officer David Callahan. Incident, prostitution sting operation. Date, October 12, 1995. Arrested, Sarah Morrison, DOB March 12, 1977, age 18. Details. Subject arrested as part of multi-agency sting operation targeting prostitution ring in downtown Providence. Subject solicited undercover officer. Found in possession of cocaine, 0.5 grams. Subject claims she was forced into prostitution by boyfriend Marcus, last name unknown. Subject states Marcus supplies drugs to keep girls dependent and compliant. Subject willing to testify against Marcus in exchange for reduced charges. Note, subject appears genuinely frightened of Marcus. States he has threatened to kill anyone who cooperates with police. Recommended for witness protection if she agrees to testify. Judge Caprio's blood turned to ice. Marcus. Sarah Morrison had named her son Marcus. She'd named him after her abuser. The man who'd forced her into prostitution. The man who'd threatened to kill her if she testified against him. Maria, Judge Caprio said, his voice barely steady. Find out what happened to this case. Did Sarah Morrison testify? Was this Marcus person ever arrested? Maria pulled out another document. She'd already been ahead of him. I found it, she said quietly. Sarah Morrison agreed to testify against Marcus Thompson, age 34, her boyfriend and pimp. But 2 days before the trial, she recanted. Said she'd lied about being forced into prostitution. Said she'd done it voluntarily. Said Marcus Thompson had nothing to do with it. She was threatened, Judge Caprio said immediately. Thompson got to her. That's what the prosecutors thought too, Maria confirmed. But without her testimony, the case against Thompson collapsed. He was released. The only charge that stuck was against Sarah Morrison, prostitution and possession. That's when she appeared in your courtroom. And I dismissed the charges, Judge Caprio said slowly. I sent her to rehab instead of jail. I gave her a second chance. You saved her life, Maria said firmly. If she'd gone to jail, Thompson would have known exactly where to find her. By dismissing the charges and sending her to rehab under a confidential program, you made it harder for him to track her. But he found her eventually, Judge Caprio said. 24 years later. He found her. Maria nodded. I looked up Marcus Thompson. He served time in Massachusetts from 1998 to 2018 for running a trafficking ring. 20 years. He was released in May 2018. Judge Caprio felt the pieces clicking into place. Marcus Thompson released from prison in May 2018. Sarah Morrison Chin started being followed in May 2019, 1 year later. 1 year to find her, to track her down, to plan his revenge against the woman who tried to testify against him 24 years ago. Did they ever find Thompson? Judge Caprio asked. After Sarah disappeared? Maria shook her head. He violated parole in June 2019, stopped reporting to his parole officer. There's a warrant out for his arrest, but he's vanished. Last known address was in Boston, but he's not there. Because he's here, Judge Caprio said. He came to Providence. He found Sarah. And he made her disappear. Or she disappeared herself to escape him, Maria offered. The letter she wrote suggests she left voluntarily. Judge Caprio picked up Sarah's letter again, reading it with new understanding. I did something terrible. Something criminal. Something that, if discovered, would send me to prison for a very long time. What if Sarah hadn't committed a crime? What if she'd been protecting Marcus, her son, from Marcus Thompson? What if she'd done something to Thompson to stop him from hurting her child? And what if she'd run because she knew the police would never believe it was self-defense? Maria, Judge Caprio said urgently, get Detective Torres on the phone. Right now. Before court convenes. I need to know everything about the Marcus Thompson case. Judge, court starts in 5 minutes. Then we have 5 minutes. Maria left to make the call. Judge Caprio sat alone with Sarah's letter, with the police reports, with the weight of a decision he'd made 24 years ago that had cascading consequences he could never have predicted. He'd saved Sarah Morrison from jail in 1995. She'd turned her life around and had a son. She'd named that son after her abuser, perhaps as a way of reclaiming the name, of transforming something that represented fear into something that represented love. And now that son was in Judge Caprio's courtroom, searching desperately for the mother who'd sacrificed everything to protect him. The intercom buzzed. Judge, Detective Torres is online too. And Judge? Court is about to convene. Marcus Chin is in the courtroom waiting. Judge Caprio picked up the phone. Detective Torres, this is Judge Frank Caprio. I need you to tell me everything you know about Sarah Chen's disappearance and Marcus Thompson. Detective Torres was about to tell Judge Caprio something that would change everything. Evidence that had been overlooked for 5 years. Evidence that proved Sarah Morrison Chen hadn't disappeared voluntarily and hadn't been killed. Evidence that revealed exactly where she'd been for 5 years. And evidence that meant Marcus Chen's desperate search might actually have a chance of succeeding. But only if Judge Caprio was willing to break every rule in the book. Judge Caprio, Detective Torres's voice came through the phone, weary but alert. I've been hoping someone would call about the Sarah Chin case. I've never closed it in my mind. There's something wrong about the whole thing that I've never been able to figure out. Tell me about Marcus Thompson, Judge Caprio said urgently. You investigated him in connection with Sarah's disappearance, didn't you? Tried to, Torres replied. But Thompson disappeared around the same time Sarah did, middle of June 2019. His parole officer reported he'd stopped checking in. When we went to his last known address in Boston, the landlord said Thompson had cleared out overnight. Left all his furniture, just took his personal belongings and vanished. That doesn't sound like a coincidence. It's not, Torres agreed. Here's what I think happened. Thompson spent a year tracking down Sarah Morrison after he got out of prison in 2018. It would have been hard, she'd changed her name to Chin, moved several times, kept a low profile. But eventually he found her. He started stalking her in May 2019. Broke into her apartment in early June. Left that threatening note. And then? Then I think she fought back, Torres said. And I think whatever happened scared Thompson enough that he ran. Judge Caprio felt a chill run down his spine. You think Sarah hurt Thompson? Maybe killed him. I think it's possible, Torres said carefully. Look at the timeline. Thompson breaks into her apartment, threatens her kid. 3 days later, Thompson misses his parole check-in, something he'd never done in the previous year. 4 days after that, Sarah parks her car at Warwick Mall and walks away from her life. Because she thought she'd killed him, Judge Caprio said slowly. She thought she'd murdered her former abuser, and she ran because she didn't think the police would believe it was self-defense. Exactly, Torres confirmed. And here's the thing, we never found Thompson's body. Never found any evidence that Sarah actually hurt him. For all we know, she scared him off, he ran, and she ran thinking she'd killed him when she actually hadn't. So Thompson could still be alive? Alive and still at large, Torres confirmed. The warrant for his parole violation is still active. If we could find him, we might be able to find out what really happened that June. Judge Caprio thought about the 8-year-old boy sitting in his courtroom, waiting for a hearing about car theft while his entire world hung in the balance. Detective, I need to tell you something. Sarah Chen's son has been searching for her. He's 8 years old and he's been conducting his own investigation. I know, Torres said, surprising him. Marcus Chen. Smart kid. Contacted me twice in the past 2 years asking questions about his mother's case. I couldn't tell him much because of his age, but I could see he'd been doing his own research. He knows more about investigative procedure than most rookie cops. He's in my courtroom right now, Judge Caprio said. Arrested for borrowing cars as part of his search for his mother. Detective, this child has spent 5 years trying to find her. He taught himself to drive so he could track down leads. He's memorized DMV records. He's built a database of everyone connected to his mother. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. Judge, Torres said carefully, I'm going to tell you something that's technically confidential, but I think you need to know. 2 weeks ago, I got a hit on a facial recognition system. It's experimental. We're not supposed to rely on it for evidence yet. But I run Sarah Chen's photograph through it every few months just in case. Judge Caprio's heart began to race. You found her? Maybe, Torres said. The system flagged a woman in a surveillance photo from a homeless shelter in New Bedford, Massachusetts. The facial recognition software says it's an 87% match to Sarah Chen. The photo was taken 4 months ago. New Bedford. Judge Caprio repeated. That's only an hour from Providence. Exactly. I drove out there last week to investigate. The shelter staff confirmed that a woman matching Sarah's description has been staying there intermittently since late 2019. She uses the name Mary Johnson. She's extremely quiet, keeps to herself, refuses to provide any background information or apply for services that would require ID. Did you talk to her? I tried, Torres said. But when I showed up at the shelter asking questions, she disappeared. The staff said she does that sometimes, vanishes for weeks, then comes back. They think she's dealing with severe trauma and paranoia. She thinks you're working with Thompson, Judge Caprio realized. She thinks if the police find her, Thompson will find her too. That's my theory, Torres agreed. She's been living in hiding for 5 years, terrified that Thompson is still looking for her, not knowing that he's also in hiding from his parole violation. But if we could find Thompson, if we could arrest him, then Sarah would be safe to come home. In theory, Torres said carefully. But Judge, even if we found Thompson and arrested him, that doesn't change the fact that Sarah abandoned her son. Child Protective Services might not look kindly on that, no matter the circumstances. Judge Caprio looked at his watch. Court was supposed to have started 5 minutes ago. An 8-year-old boy was sitting in his courtroom, waiting to be sentenced for crimes he'd committed while searching for his mother. A mother who might be alive, might be only an hour away, might be able to come home if only they could find Marcus Thompson. Detective Torres, I need a favor. I need you to come to my courtroom this afternoon. And I need you to bring every piece of evidence you have about Sarah Chen and Marcus Thompson. Judge, I don't understand. I'm going to do something I've never done in 40 years on the bench, Judge Caprio said. I'm going to turn a criminal hearing into an investigation. That boy has been searching for his mother for 5 years using nothing but a public library and stolen cars. Maybe it's time we gave him the resources of the actual police department. Judge, I can't officially involve a child in an active investigation. Then unofficially involve him, Judge Caprio interrupted. Detective, you said yourself that Marcus Chin knows more about investigative procedure than most rookie cops. He's built a database. He's tracked leads. He's been at this for 5 years with no help from anyone. What if we helped him? There was a long silence on the phone. Judge, Torres finally said, if we do this and if we're wrong about Sarah being alive, that kid is going to be devastated. And if we don't do this and Sarah is alive and hiding an hour away while her son spends his childhood in foster care searching for her, then we've failed both of them, Judge Caprio replied. I gave Sarah Morrison a second chance in 1995, and she used it to build a life and raise an incredible son. Now I need to give that son a chance to find her. All right, Torres said. I'll be there in an hour. And Judge? I hope you're right about this. So do I, Judge Caprio said quietly. So do I. He hung up the phone and pressed the intercom. Maria, is Marcus Chin in the courtroom? Yes, Judge. Along with his foster parents, the car owners whose vehicles he borrowed, and about 50 people who saw the media coverage about the 8-year-old car thief. It's standing room only. Of course it was. The media loved stories about child criminals. They'd have a field day with this 8-year-old genius steals cars, faces stern judge. But Judge Caprio was about to give them a very different story. Tell everyone court will convene in 10 minutes. I need to make one more phone call. He dialed his sister Joyce's number. She answered on the second ring. Frank? What's wrong? You never call during court hours. Joyce, I need your help. Do you remember Sarah Morrison? Sarah Morrison? Joyce repeated, confused. The name sounds familiar, but... 1995. Young woman, prostitution and drug charges. I dismissed them and sent her to rehab. You were working at the rehab center at the time. You might have treated her. There was a pause. Oh my God. Sarah Morrison. Yes, I remember her. Sweet girl, terrified, determined to turn her life around. She completed the program successfully. I remember because she wrote me a thank you note afterward. That was almost 30 years ago, Frank. Why are you asking about her now? Because her 8-year-old son is in my courtroom, and he's been searching for her for 5 years. Joyce, I need you to come down here. I need you to help me with something. Frank, what's going on? I'm trying to reunite a mother and son, Judge Caprio said. And I need my sister, the woman who spent 40 years helping people recover from trauma, to help me do it. I'm on my way, Joyce said without hesitation. 20 minutes. Judge Caprio hung up and stood, straightening his robes. He looked at Sarah Morrison's letter one more time, at her handwritten plea to help her son, at her desperate hope that the judge who'd saved her 24 years ago might save her child too. Please help him. He intended to do exactly that. Judge Caprio was about to walk into his courtroom and make a decision that would end his career or define his legacy. He was going to turn a juvenile criminal hearing into a public investigation. He was going to enlist an 8-year-old as a partner. And he was going to break every protocol in the judicial handbook to do it. But what he didn't know was that Marcus Chen had already figured out where his mother was. And he'd been planning something that would force the judge's hand. Judge Frank Caprio entered the courtroom and the standing room only crowd fell silent. Every seat in the gallery was filled. Reporters lined the back wall. Camera crews had been allowed in per his earlier instruction, because what he was about to do needed to be public. At the defendant's table sat 8-year-old Marcus Chin, dwarfed by the furniture, his feet barely touching the floor. He wore donated clothes that didn't quite fit, pants too long, shirt too big. His oversized glasses kept sliding down his nose. But his eyes, those dark, intelligent eyes that Judge Caprio had found so familiar in the photograph, were fixed on the judge with an intensity that was unnerving in someone so young. Beside Marcus sat his foster parents, Tom and Rachel Williams. They looked exhausted, worried, and out of their depth. This was the 4th foster home Marcus had been placed in. They tried their best. But how do you parent a child whose intelligence outpaces yours and whose mission in life is something you can't help him with? In the gallery sat the 5 people whose cars Marcus had borrowed: Patricia Morrison, David Reynolds, Jennifer Wu, Thomas DeLuca, and Michael Caprio, the judge's nephew. Also present, Maria Santos at her clerk's desk, Tony Raichi at his bailiff post, and a crowd of Providence citizens who'd come to see what America's most compassionate judge would do with an 8-year-old car thief. Judge Caprio sat down, picked up his gavel, and set it down again without using it. This wasn't going to be that kind of hearing. Court is now in session, Maria announced. The case of the state of Rhode Island versus Marcus Chin, age 8, multiple counts of unauthorized use of a motor vehicle. Judge Caprio looked directly at Marcus. The boy looked back, unflinching. Marcus chin, Judge Caprio said gently, "Do you understand why you're here today?" "Yes, Your Honor," Marcus replied, his voice clear and composed. "I'm here because I borrowed 5 cars without permission. I committed 5 counts of unauthorized use of a motor vehicle, which is a Class B misdemeanor in Rhode Island, punishable by up to 6 months in juvenile detention and a fine up to $1,000 per count." The courtroom murmured. The 8-year-old had just cited the exact statute and penalty for his crimes. "You seem to know the law very well," Judge Caprio observed. "I've been studying it for 2 years," Marcus replied. "I needed to understand the legal system because I knew I might have to break the law to find my mother, and I wanted to know what consequences I'd face." The courtroom went silent. This wasn't a child making excuses. This was a child who'd calculated the cost of his actions and decided the goal was worth the price. "Tell me about your mother," Judge Caprio said. Marcus reached into a folder he'd brought with him, a thick, worn folder held together with rubber bands. He pulled out a photograph and held it up so the judge could see. "This is Sarah Morrison Chin," Marcus said. "My mother. She disappeared on June 15, 2019, when I was 3 years old. She left me alone in our apartment. The police found me 3 days later. I've been in foster care ever since." He pulled out more documents, police reports, missing person flyers, newspaper articles. "The police say she abandoned me. The social workers say she wasn't capable of being a mother. The foster parents I've lived with say I should accept that she's gone and try to move on with my life." Marcus's voice remained steady, but Judge Caprio could see the pain in his eyes. "But I know my mother didn't abandon me because she didn't love me. I know she left because she was trying to protect me. And I know she's still alive because a mother who loves her child doesn't just stop existing. She's somewhere. And I'm going to find her." He pulled out a thick notebook, the kind with a hard cover and ruled pages. It was filled with handwriting, charts, maps, lists. "This is my investigation log. I started it when I was 6 years old as soon as I learned to write properly. I've documented every piece of information I could find about my mother's disappearance. I've interviewed, without them knowing I was interviewing them, 17 people who knew my mother. I've accessed public records at the library. I've studied police procedures and investigative techniques." Marcus opened the notebook to a page filled with names and addresses. "I created a database of every person my mother knew, every place she worked, every car she owned or might have had access to. Then I cross-referenced that with DMV records to find current vehicle registrations for people connected to her." He looked directly at Judge Caprio. "The 5 cars I borrowed belonged to 5 people who all had connections to my mother 24 years ago in 1995. I thought if I could find them, if I could talk to them, they might remember something that could help me find her." Judge Caprio felt his chest tighten. This 8-year-old had conducted a more thorough investigation than most trained detectives. "Did you find anything?" Judge Caprio asked. "Yes," Marcus said. He pulled out another document, a printout of a photograph. "This is a picture from the Providence Journal Archives, October 1995. It shows my mother, though she was only 18 then, standing outside this courthouse after a hearing." He pointed to a figure in the background of the photo. "And this is you, Judge Caprio. You were the judge who presided over her case. You dismissed the charges against her and gave her a second chance." The courtroom erupted in whispers. Judge Caprio held up his hand for silence. "Marcus, how did you know to look for me?" "Because my mother named me after you," Marcus said simply. Judge Caprio's breath caught. "What?" "Not directly," Marcus clarified. "But I found her journals in a storage unit. The foster parents didn't know she'd been paying for a storage unit, but I found the key in the belongings that came with me into foster care. In her journals, she wrote about the judge who'd saved her life in 1995. She wrote about how kind you were, how you'd believed in her when no one else did." Marcus pulled out a photocopy of a handwritten journal entry. She wrote, "If I ever have a son, I want him to have the kind of character Judge Caprio showed me today. I want him to be brave and kind and willing to give people second chances. I want him to be someone who sees the best in people even when they can't see it themselves." Tears were streaming down Marcus's face now, but his voice remained steady. "She named me Marcus because that was the name of her grandfather, the only person who was ever kind to her when she was a child. But she raised me with your values, Judge Caprio. She taught me to be kind. She taught me to believe in second chances. She taught me to see the best in people." Marcus wiped his eyes with his sleeve. "And then she disappeared. And I've spent 5 years trying to understand why a mother who loved me that much would leave me. I've considered every possibility, that she died, that she was killed, that she ran away, that she was kidnapped. He pulled out one final document, a printout of a police report. But 3 months ago, I accessed through unconventional means, the Providence Police Department database. I found the reports about my mother being stalked in the weeks before she disappeared. I found out about Marcus Thompson, the man who'd abused her 24 years ago. The man who'd threatened her. The man who broke into our apartment and left a note threatening me. The courtroom was silent except for the sound of Marcus's voice. My mother didn't abandon me. She left to protect me. She thought if she disappeared, Marcus Thompson would stop looking for me. She sacrificed herself to keep me safe. Marcus looked directly at Judge Caprio, his 8-year-old face showing more courage than most adults could muster. So yes, Your Honor, I stole cars. I broke the law. And I'd do it again in a heartbeat if it meant I had even the smallest chance of finding my mother and telling her that she doesn't have to hide anymore. That I'm safe. That I need her. That I love her. He paused. And Judge Caprio, I found her. The courtroom exploded. Reporters began shouting questions. The foster parents gasped. Judge Caprio held up his hand for silence, but his heart was racing. What did you say? Marcus pulled out one more document, a surveillance photo printed from what appeared to be a public webcam. This is from a homeless shelter in New Bedford, Massachusetts. I've been monitoring public webcams and security footage accessible through city websites. It's all public domain, so technically not illegal. 4 days ago, I saw this woman entering the shelter. He held up the photo. It showed a thin, worn woman with long dark hair, wearing donated clothes, her face turned partially away from the camera. But Judge Caprio recognized her immediately. It was Sarah Morrison. Older, thinner, worn down by 5 years of hiding, but unmistakably her. I know where my mother is, Marcus said. I've known for 4 days. And Judge Caprio, I need your help to bring her home. Marcus Chin had just publicly announced that he'd found his missing mother, that he'd hacked police databases, and that he was asking a judge, on camera in front of reporters, to help him break protocol to reunite them. Judge Caprio had seconds to decide: follow the law and separate this child from his mother even longer, or break every rule he'd ever followed and do what his conscience demanded. What he decided next would either end his career or define his greatest moment. Judge Frank Caprio stared at the surveillance photograph of Sarah Morrison Chin. 5 years older. Weathered by life on the streets. Hiding in plain sight an hour away while her son searched desperately for her. The courtroom waited in absolute silence. Every eye was on Judge Caprio. The reporters, the cameras, the gallery full of citizens, the foster parents, the car owners, and most importantly, 8-year-old Marcus Chin, whose entire future hung in the balance of whatever decision came next. Judge Caprio could do what the law demanded: sentence Marcus for his crimes, lecture him about taking the law into his own hands, hand him back to foster care, and let the proper authorities handle the situation with Sarah Morrison. It was the safe choice. The legal choice. The choice that wouldn't risk his reputation or his career. Or he could do something he'd never done in 40 years on the bench. He could choose the human being over the legal system. Marcus, Judge Caprio said slowly, you've committed multiple crimes. You've stolen cars. You've hacked into police databases. You've violated probably a dozen laws I'm not even aware of yet. Marcus nodded, accepting. Yes, Your Honor. I'm prepared to face the consequences. The maximum penalty for your offenses could be significant time in juvenile detention, Judge Caprio continued. You could be separated from your foster family. Your record could follow you for years. I know, Marcus said quietly. But finding my mother was worth any consequence. Judge Caprio removed his glasses, cleaning them slowly, the gesture that court watchers knew meant he was about to make an important decision. Marcus, I presided over your mother's case in 1995. I gave her a second chance. She used that chance to turn her life around, to get clean, to get educated, to build a life. And most importantly, she used it to become your mother. He looked directly at the 8-year-old. You are proof that second chances work. You are proof that compassion matters. You are proof that believing in people, even when they're at their lowest, can change the world. Judge Caprio stood up from his bench and the courtroom held its breath. So here's my ruling. I'm dismissing all charges against Marcus Chin. The courtroom erupted. Reporters shouted questions. The foster parents looked shocked. Marcus's eyes went wide. Furthermore, Judge Caprio continued, raising his voice over the commotion, I'm issuing an immediate order for Child Protective Services to expedite the investigation into Sarah Morrison Chen's fitness as a parent. If she can be located, if she can be verified as mentally and physically capable of caring for her son, and if she wishes to be reunited with him, then this court will support that reunification. Maria Santos was frantically taking notes. This was unprecedented territory. And finally, Judge Caprio said, looking directly at the cameras, I'm calling on Detective Michael Torres of the Providence Police Department, who I know is watching this, to immediately reopen the active investigation into Marcus Thompson's whereabouts. Because until Thompson is located and arrested, Sarah Morrison Chen cannot safely come home. He looked back at Marcus. You've spent 5 years searching for your mother with nothing but a library card and determination. Now you're going to have the full resources of the Rhode Island legal system helping you. Because Marcus, you were right about one thing. A mother who loves her child that much doesn't just stop existing. She's out there. And we're going to bring her home. The courtroom erupted in applause, but Judge Caprio wasn't finished. However, he said, and the room quieted again, I need you to promise me something, Marcus. No more stealing cars. No more hacking databases. No more taking the law into your own hands. From now on, you let the adults help you. Can you promise me that? Marcus nodded, tears streaming down his face. Yes, Your Honor. I promise. Good. Because breaking the law, even for a good reason, has consequences. And I need you to understand that while I'm dismissing your charges this time, that's not a free pass for the future. You have an incredible mind, Marcus. Use it legally from now on. I will, Your Honor. Thank you. Judge Caprio looked out at the courtroom, at the reporters documenting every word, at the citizens witnessing this moment. Let me be clear about something, he said. What I'm doing here violates every protocol in the judicial handbook. I'm supposed to be impartial. I'm supposed to follow the law without consideration for personal circumstances. I'm supposed to treat every defendant the same way regardless of their story. He paused. But 40 years on this bench has taught me that sometimes, not always but sometimes, justice and the law are not the same thing. Sometimes doing what's right means bending the rules. Sometimes showing compassion means taking risks. And sometimes helping one child find his mother is more important than maintaining judicial protocol. Judge Caprio looked at Marcus. Your mother wrote me a letter 5 years ago. I didn't open it until this morning. In it, she asked me to help you if you ever needed it. She asked me to give you the same second chance I gave her. He pulled Sarah's letter from his robe pocket. Marcus, your mother loved you so much that she gave up everything, her life, her identity, her home, to keep you safe from a man who wanted to hurt you both. She's been living on the streets for 5 years, terrified and alone, because she believed that was the only way to protect you. Judge Caprio's voice grew thick with emotion. But she was wrong about one thing. She thought she had to protect you alone. She thought the system would fail you like it failed her when she was young. She didn't know that her son would grow up to be brilliant, determined, and brave enough to search for her despite every obstacle. He looked around the courtroom. And she didn't know that when that search finally led her son to my courtroom, I would move heaven and earth to help reunite them. Because that's what she asked me to do. And because that's what justice, real justice, demands. The courtroom was silent except for the sound of people crying. Tom Williams, Marcus's foster father, had his arm around his wife Rachel, both of them wiping tears. Michael Caprio, the judge's nephew whose car Marcus had borrowed, was openly sobbing. At that moment, the courtroom doors opened. Detective Michael Torres walked in, accompanied by Judge Caprio's sister Joyce. Behind them was a woman in her early 60s carrying a laptop case. Dr. Patricia Morrison, the child psychologist who'd evaluated Marcus years ago. Judge Caprio had called in reinforcements. Detective Torres, Judge Caprio said, thank you for coming on such short notice. I believe you have information relevant to this case. Torres approached the bench, his face serious. Your Honor, based on the surveillance photo that Marcus Chen has provided, I can confirm that the woman in that image matches the physical description of Sarah Morrison Chen. I visited the New Bedford shelter this morning after your call. The courtroom leaned forward collectively. I spoke with the shelter director. A woman using the name Mary Johnson has been staying there intermittently since late 2019. She fits Sarah Chen's description. She's extremely quiet, refuses to provide identification or background information, and disappears for weeks at a time when anyone asks too many questions. Did you speak with her? Judge Caprio asked. No, Your Honor. She wasn't at the shelter this morning. According to the staff, she comes and goes. She usually returns every few days for meals and a place to sleep, but she never stays long. Judge Caprio turned to Marcus. Marcus, you said you found your mother 4 days ago. Have you been monitoring that shelter? Marcus nodded. I set up alerts on all the public webcams in the area. Every time the camera catches movement at the shelter entrance, I get a notification. My mother, if it's really her, appears at the shelter approximately every 3 days. She arrived 4 days ago, which means she'll be back today or tomorrow, Judge Caprio finished. Yes, Your Honor. The judge looked at Detective Torres. Detective, if we sent someone to that shelter, someone Sarah would trust, do you think we could make contact without frightening her away? Possibly, Torres said carefully. But Your Honor, you're talking about conducting an intervention outside my jurisdiction. New Bedford is in Massachusetts. I have no authority there. But I do, said a new voice from the back of the courtroom. Everyone turned to see a woman in her 50s standing up from the gallery. She wore a Massachusetts State Police uniform. Lieutenant Angela Santos, Massachusetts State Police, she introduced herself. I'm Maria Santos's sister. She called me an hour ago and told me what was happening. Your Honor, if you're planning what I think you're planning, I want to help. Judge Caprio looked at Maria, who gave him a small nod. Of course, Maria had been thinking ahead, making connections, preparing for exactly this moment. Lieutenant Santos, Judge Caprio said, what would you need to conduct a welfare check on a woman potentially living at a homeless shelter in New Bedford? Just a reasonable concern for her safety, Lieutenant Santos replied. Which, based on what I'm hearing, we certainly have. Sarah Morrison Chin was the victim of stalking and threats 5 years ago. She's been missing for 5 years. Her minor child has been desperately searching for her. That's more than enough justification. She walked up to the bench. Your Honor, if you can provide me with positive identification of Sarah Chin, something more than just a surveillance photo, I can coordinate with New Bedford PD to locate her and conduct a welfare check. We won't arrest her. We won't force her to do anything. We'll simply verify that she's alive and safe, and we'll inform her that her son is looking for her. Judge Caprio turned to Marcus. Marcus, besides that surveillance photo, do you have any other evidence that this woman is your mother? Marcus pulled out his phone, an old donated smartphone that clearly barely worked. He opened a photo gallery and showed it to the judge. I took these screenshots from the webcam over the past 4 days. They're all of the same woman. And look, in this one you can see her left hand. Judge Caprio looked at the grainy photo. The woman's left hand was visible, and on her ring finger was a distinctive mark. That's a scar, Marcus explained. My mother had a scar on her left ring finger from an accident when she was young. She told me about it. She said it looked like a crescent moon. He pulled out another photo, this one from his early childhood. A young Sarah Chin holding baby Marcus, her left hand visible. And there, on her ring finger, was a crescent-shaped scar. It's her, Marcus said with absolute certainty. That's my mother. Detective Torres examined both photos. The scar is distinctive enough for positive ID, he confirmed. Combined with the facial features, the timeline, and the location, I'd say we have probable cause to believe this is Sarah Morrison Chin. Judge Caprio looked around his courtroom, at Detective Torres, at Lieutenant Santos, at his sister Joyce, at Dr. Morrison, at 8-year-old Marcus Chin, who'd spent 5 years searching for his mother. What he was about to do would make legal scholars write papers about judicial overreach. What he was about to do would give his critics ammunition for years. What he was about to do might end his career. But what he was about to do was right. Here's what we're going to do, Judge Caprio announced. Lieutenant Santos, you'll coordinate with New Bedford PD to locate Sarah Morrison Chin and conduct a welfare check. Detective Torres, you'll provide all relevant case files and evidence. He looked at Joyce. My sister Joyce Caprio Martinez is a licensed clinical social worker with 40 years of experience in trauma counseling. She'll accompany the officers to provide support if Sarah Chin is located. Dr. Morrison, you'll be on standby to provide psychological evaluation if needed. Then he looked at Marcus. Marcus, you'll wait here with your foster parents. If your mother is found, if she's safe, and if she wishes to see you, then we'll arrange a reunification under supervised conditions. Your Honor, Tom Williams, the foster father, spoke up for the first time. Rachel and I, we've been caring for Marcus for almost 2 years now. We love him. We want what's best for him. And if what's best is reuniting him with his mother, then we support that completely. Rachel Williams nodded, wiping tears. We've always told Marcus that we're just temporary. that we're taking care of him until he can go home. If today is that day, we're happy for him. Even though we'll miss him terribly. Marcus looked at his foster parents with genuine affection. You've been good to me, he said quietly. Thank you for not giving up on me even when I kept stealing cars and talking about nothing but finding my mom. Tom Williams smiled through his tears. How could we give up on you, Marcus? You're the most remarkable kid we've ever known. Judge Caprio felt his own eyes welling up. This was what justice should look like. Not cold application of law, but human beings helping human beings, a community coming together to right a wrong. All right, he said, pulling himself together. Lieutenant Santos, Detective Torres, how quickly can you mobilize? I can have New Bedford PD at that shelter within the hour, Lieutenant Santos said. But Your Honor, we have a problem. Sarah Chin is there now, great. But if she's not, she might not return for days. And if she sees police presence, she might never come back. Marcus spoke up. I have an idea. Everyone looked at the 8-year-old. My mother is hiding because she's afraid of Marcus Thompson. She's afraid he'll find her or find me. But what if we could prove to her that Thompson has been arrested? That he can't hurt us anymore? Marcus, we haven't arrested Thompson, Detective Torres said. We don't know where he is. But my mother doesn't know that, Marcus replied. What if we staged a news report? Made it look like Thompson had been arrested? She might see it. Homeless shelters usually have TVs. If she thinks Thompson is in custody, she might feel safe enough to contact the authorities. Judge Caprio stared at the 8-year-old. Marcus, you're suggesting we create false news reports? Not false exactly, Marcus said. More like premature. We say Thompson has been arrested and is in custody pending charges. Then, when my mother sees it and comes forward, we actually do arrest Thompson. We make the news report true retroactively. That's entrapment, Detective Torres said immediately. We can't. Actually, Lieutenant Santos interrupted, it's not entrapment if we're not trying to trap Thompson. We're trying to protect Sarah Chen by making her believe she's safe. And the kid has a point. If Sarah comes forward thinking Thompson is in custody, she'll be willing to testify about what happened in 2019. That testimony could give us the evidence we need to actually arrest Thompson. She looked at Judge Caprio. Your Honor, this is highly irregular, but it might work. If we coordinate with local news stations, tell them we're conducting an operation to locate a missing person who's in danger, they might be willing to run a story. It's not technically false if we're actively pursuing Thompson's arrest. Judge Caprio rubbed his temples. He'd already violated about a dozen protocols today. What was one more? Do it, he said. Coordinate with the media. Tell them exactly what's happening. We're trying to bring a mother home to her son, and we need their help to do it. If they're willing to run the story, we do it today. He looked at Marcus. If this works, Marcus, your mother might be home by tonight. Are you ready for that? Marcus's eyes filled with tears, but he nodded firmly. I've been ready for 5 years, Your Honor. The plan was set in motion. News stations agreed to run the story. Police were positioned at the New Bedford shelter. Judge Caprio had put his career on the line. But nobody had considered one crucial factor. Marcus Thompson was watching the news too. And when he saw reports of his arrest, he would realize it was a trap. The race was on. Would Sarah see the news and come forward before Thompson figured out what was happening and came for her one last time? By 3 p.m. that afternoon, every major news station in Rhode Island and Massachusetts was running the story. Breaking. Man wanted in connection with 2019 missing person case arrested. Marcus Thompson, 63, wanted for parole violation and being investigated in connection with the disappearance of Providence woman Sarah Chin, has been taken into custody by Providence police. Thompson, who served 20 years in Massachusetts for trafficking charges, is being held without bail pending multiple charges. Authorities say this arrest may finally provide answers in the 5-year-old disappearance of Chin, a single mother who vanished in June 2019, leaving her 3-year-old son alone. The story ran with Thompson's mugshot from his 2018 parole release. It showed a hard man with cold eyes, the kind of man who looked exactly like what he was. At the New Bedford homeless shelter, staff had been briefed by Lieutenant Santos. They understood that a woman calling herself Mary Johnson might react strongly to the news coverage. They were instructed to note any unusual behavior but not to approach her directly. At Providence Municipal Court, Judge Caprio's chambers had been transformed into a command center. Laptops were set up showing live feeds from news stations. Detective Torres was coordinating with New Bedford PD. Lieutenant Santos was on site at the shelter. Joyce Caprio Martinez was standing by with Dr. Morrison to provide support if Sarah was located. And Marcus Chin sat on a chair in the corner, his notebook in his lap, his eyes fixed on the screen showing news coverage, waiting for the mother he hadn't seen in 5 years to see the news and realize she could finally come home. Tom and Rachel Williams sat with him, holding his hands. Judge Caprio paced, his phone in his hand, waiting for the call. 4 p.m. came and went. No word from New Bedford. 4:30 p.m. Still nothing. At 4:47 p.m., Maria Santos's phone rang. She answered, listened for a moment, then looked at Judge Caprio with wide eyes. "It's Lieutenant Santos. She says a woman matching Sarah Chen's description just entered the shelter. She's asking to speak with the director. She's extremely agitated." Judge Caprio's heart raced. "Put it on speaker." Maria pressed the speaker button. Lieutenant Santos's voice came through, slightly breathless. "Judge, she's here. I'm observing from an unmarked vehicle across the street. The shelter director just went to speak with her. The woman is crying. She keeps pointing at the TV. The news is running the Thompson story right now. She's saying something but I can't hear from here. Hold on." The line went quiet for a moment. Then Lieutenant Santos came back. "Judge, the shelter director just came outside. She's signaling me. I'm going in." "Wait," Judge Caprio said urgently. "Don't approach her as police. Send in Joyce. Sarah knows Joyce from the rehab program in 1995. She'll trust her." "Good call. Hold on." They could hear movement, voices. Then Joyce's voice came on the line. "Frank, I'm going in. Wish me luck." The line went to hold. Marcus stood up, his small body tense with anticipation. "Is it her? Is it really her?" "We don't know yet, Marcus," Judge Caprio said gently. "But it might be." They waited. 5 minutes felt like 5 hours. Then Joyce's voice came back on the line, thick with emotion. "Frank, it's her. It's Sarah Morrison. She recognized me immediately. God, Frank, she's been living on the streets for 5 years. She's malnourished, she has untreated medical issues, she's terrified. But she's alive." Judge Caprio felt tears streaming down his face. "Joyce, tell her. Frank, she's asking about Marcus. She saw the news story and realized that if Thompson is really in custody, she can ask about her son without putting him in danger. She's asking if he's okay, if he's safe, if he remembers her." Marcus grabbed the phone from Maria's hand. "Mom? Mom, it's me. It's Marcus. I'm okay. I've been looking for you. I found you, Mom." Through the phone, they could hear a woman scream, not of fear but of overwhelming emotion. Then sobbing. Deep, wrenching sobs of a mother who'd spent 5 years thinking she'd never hear her son's voice again. "Marcus." Sarah's voice came through the phone, broken and raw. "Marcus, baby, is that really you?" "It's me, Mom. I'm here. I found you. Judge Caprio helped me. We're bringing you home." "I'm so sorry," Sarah sobbed. "I'm so sorry I left you. I thought Thompson was going to hurt you. I thought if I disappeared he'd stop looking for you. I thought." "I know, Mom. I know everything. I read the police reports. I figured it out. You were protecting me. You saved me." There wasn't a dry eye in Judge Caprio's chambers. Even Tony Raichi, the hardened bailiff, was wiping his face. "Marcus, I'm so proud of you," Sarah cried. "My baby. My smart, brave baby. How did you find me?" "I learned to drive," Marcus said, and somehow, despite everything, he laughed. "I stole some cars. Got arrested. Ended up in Judge Caprio's courtroom, the same judge who helped you in 1995. He remembered you, Mom. He helped me find you." Sarah's crying intensified. "Judge Caprio? He's still there? After all these years?" Judge Caprio took the phone from Marcus gently. "Hello, Sarah. It's been a long time." "Judge Caprio," Sarah's voice was barely a whisper. "You gave me a second chance 24 years ago. And I tried, I swear I tried, to use it well. I stayed clean. I raised my son. I worked hard. But then Thompson found me and I failed." "You didn't fail," Judge Caprio interrupted firmly. "You protected your son. You sacrificed everything to keep him safe. That's not failure, Sarah. That's love. But I left him alone for 5 years. And he spent 5 years searching for you. He never gave up. He never stopped believing you loved him. Sarah, your son is the most remarkable child I've met in 40 years on the bench. He's brilliant, he's determined, he's compassionate. Everything you hoped he would be when you wrote me that letter 5 years ago." "You read my letter?" Sarah asked. "Today," Judge Caprio admitted. I'd been on medical leave when you sent it. It got filed away. I didn't read it until this morning when Marcus walked into my courtroom accused of stealing cars to search for you. Sarah, you asked me to help him. I'm going to do better than that. I'm going to bring you home to him. Through the phone, they could hear Sarah crying so hard she couldn't speak. Joyce's voice came back on the line. Frank, we need to get Sarah medical attention. She's dehydrated, malnourished, and I think she has an untreated infection. I'm taking her to Rhode Island Hospital. Can you meet us there with Marcus? We'll be there in 20 minutes, Judge Caprio said. He hung up and looked at Marcus, whose face was streaked with tears but glowing with joy. Marcus, your mother is alive. She's safe. And in about an hour, you're going to see her for the first time in 5 years. Are you ready? Marcus nodded, unable to speak. But then Tom Williams spoke up, his voice hesitant. Judge, what about the news story? About Thompson being arrested? That was fake. When Thompson sees it, he'll know it's a trap. He'll know Sarah has come forward. What if he comes after her again? The joy in the room evaporated instantly. Judge Caprio felt his blood run cold. Tom was right. They'd used the fake news story to lure Sarah out of hiding, but Thompson would see the same news. He'd realize it was a trap. He'd know Sarah had been found. And if Thompson was as dangerous as the report suggested, he might make one final attempt to silence the woman who tried to testify against him 24 years ago. Detective Torres, Judge Caprio said urgently, we need protective custody for Sarah Chin. Now. Torres was already on his phone. I'm calling it in. We'll have uniformed officers at Rhode Island Hospital within 15 minutes. And Judge, I'm putting out a bolo for Marcus Thompson. Every cop in New England will be looking for him. It might not be enough, Judge Caprio said. If Thompson has been tracking Sarah for 5 years, if he's obsessed with her, then he'll have been monitoring news coverage. He might already know she's been found. Maria Santos looked up from her computer. Judge, the news story went live at 3 p.m. It's been running for over 2 hours. If Thompson saw it, he could already be on his way to New Bedford, Judge Caprio finished. His phone rang. It was Joyce and she sounded terrified. Frank, we have a problem. Sarah just told me something. Marcus Thompson knows about the New Bedford shelter. Judge Caprio felt his stomach drop. How? Because he found her there once before, Joyce said, her voice shaking. 6 months ago. He showed up at the shelter looking for Mary Johnson. The staff told him no one by that name was a regular resident and he left. But Sarah saw him. She's been moving between 3 different shelters ever since, never staying in one place more than a day or two. Joyce, get her out of there. Now. We're already leaving. Lieutenant Santos has her in an unmarked vehicle. But Frank, if Thompson saw the news and realized Sarah would go to authorities, he might be waiting somewhere between here and Providence. He might. The call cut off abruptly. Joyce. Judge Caprio shouted into the phone. Joyce. No response. The line was dead. Call her back, Detective Torres ordered. Maria dialed. It rang and rang. No answer. Torres was already on his radio. All units, we have a potential emergency situation. Lieutenant Angela Santos is transporting a witness from New Bedford to Providence, Rhode Island. Last known location. He looked at Judge Caprio. Route 24, Judge Caprio said, thinking of the most direct route from New Bedford. They'd take Route 24 to Route 195. Torres relayed the information. All Massachusetts State Police units converge on Route 24 between New Bedford and Fall River. We have a vehicle carrying a witness who may be in danger. The vehicle is an unmarked gray Ford sedan, Massachusetts plate. He looked at Lieutenant Santos's information on file. Plate number Mike Alpha 7235. He turned to Judge Caprio. Every available unit is heading there now. But Judge Caprio was looking at Marcus, whose face had gone white. Is my mom in danger? Marcus asked in a small voice. Judge Caprio knelt down in front of the 8-year-old. Marcus, your mother is with police officers. They're trained to protect people. And every cop in Massachusetts is looking for that vehicle right now. She's going to be okay. You don't know that, Marcus said, and despite his young age, his eyes showed the kind of wisdom that came from loss. You can't promise that. My mom has been running for 5 years because Thompson wants to hurt her. And now he knows where she is. Judge Caprio had spent 40 years on the bench. He'd made thousands of promises. But he couldn't make this one. He couldn't promise an 8-year-old that the mother they just found wouldn't be taken away again. So instead, he pulled Marcus into a hug. Something judges weren't supposed to do, another rule broken in a day of shattered protocols. I'm not going to lose her again, Marcus said into Judge Caprio's shoulder. I can't. Not after 5 years. Not when we just found her. You won't, Judge Caprio said, making a promise he had no authority to make. I won't let that happen. Detective Torres's radio crackled to life. All units, we have visual on the gray Ford sedan, Route 24 northbound near exit 9. Vehicle appears to be driving normally. No signs of distress. Maintaining visual distance to avoid alarming potential suspect if present in area. Torres looked at Judge Caprio. They found them. They're okay. But before anyone could feel relief, the radio crackled again. Wait, we have a second vehicle approaching the Ford at high speed. Dark blue sedan appears to be attempting to overtake. Ford is accelerating. This might be our suspect. All units, code 3, converge on Route 24 exit 9 now. The radio erupted with voices. Police units calling out positions, highway patrol announcing they were blocking exits, emergency services preparing for potential accident response. And in Judge Caprio's chambers, everyone stood frozen, listening to a police chase unfold 40 miles away, knowing that Sarah Morrison Chin, who'd spent 5 years hiding, who'd just been found by her son, who'd finally thought she was safe, was being pursued by the man who'd destroyed her life twice before. Marcus pulled away from Judge Caprio's embrace. His face was pale but his voice was steady. Judge Caprio, if something happens to my mom, I need you to know something. Marcus, don't. I need you to know that the 5 years I spent looking for her were the best years of my life, Marcus said. Because I had hope. I had a purpose. I knew my mom loved me and I knew I'd find her someday. And I did. Even if Thompson takes her away again, even if the worst happens, I'll always know that I found her. That she knows I never gave up on her. That she knows I love her. Judge Caprio felt his heart breaking. No child should have to say these words. No child should have to prepare for the loss of a parent they'd just gotten back. The radio crackled. Shots fired. Repeat, shots fired on Route 24. Dark blue sedan fired on the Ford. Ford swerving but maintaining control. Multiple units in pursuit. Suspect vehicle accelerating. The transmission cut off into static. Then silence. Endless, terrible silence. Marcus stared at the radio, his small body rigid. Detective Torres was shouting into his phone, trying to get information. Maria Santos had her hands over her mouth, tears streaming down her face. Tom and Rachel Williams held each other, horrified. And Judge Frank Caprio stood in his chambers, surrounded by broken protocols and shattered rules, realizing that all his compassion, all his good intentions, all his attempts to help might have just gotten Sarah Morrison Chin killed. The silence stretched for 30 seconds. 45 seconds. A minute. Then the radio crackled back to life. All units, suspect vehicle disabled. Driver in custody. Repeat, Marcus Thompson in custody. Lieutenant Santos and passenger safe. No injuries to officers or witness. Situation code 4. The chambers erupted in shouts of relief and tears. Marcus collapsed into his foster parents' arms, sobbing. Detective Torres sagged against the desk. Maria Santos actually cheered. Judge Caprio felt his legs give out. He sat down heavily in his chair, his hands shaking, realizing how close they'd come to tragedy. The radio continued. Lieutenant Santos reports passenger is Sarah Morrison Chin, confirmed identity. Chin is shaken but unharmed. Thompson is being transported to Massachusetts State Police Barracks. Providence PD can pick him up for parole violation and questioning regarding 2019 stalking and threats. Detective Torres looked at Judge Caprio. We got him. We actually got him. How? Judge Caprio asked. Torres listened to his radio for another moment, then looked up with a grim smile. Thompson saw the news story. He realized it was a trap to draw Sarah out. He went to New Bedford to find her. When he saw Lieutenant Santos's vehicle leaving with a woman matching Sarah's description, he followed them onto the highway. He was planning to run them off the road. But every cop in Massachusetts was already looking for Lieutenant Santos's vehicle after the call dropped. Thompson drove right into the largest police response that highway's seen in years. When he fired shots at the vehicle, 12 police cars converged. He crashed trying to evade. Nobody hurt except Thompson's ego. Judge Caprio looked at Marcus. Your mother is safe. Thompson is in custody. It's over. Marcus wiped his eyes. His voice was small but steady. Can I see her now? Yes, Judge Caprio said. Let's go see your mother. After 5 years of searching, after borrowing cars and hacking databases, after facing a judge and breaking every rule, Marcus Chen was finally about to see his mother again. But nobody knew if a mother and son could rebuild a relationship after 5 years apart. Nobody knew if Sarah could recover from the trauma. Nobody knew if the system would allow them to stay together. The hardest part wasn't finding each other. It was figuring out how to be a family again. Rhode Island Hospital's emergency entrance was surrounded by police vehicles when Judge Caprio arrived with Marcus. News vans had gotten word of the dramatic highway incident and were set up across the street, cameras pointed at every entrance. But hospital security, coordinated by Detective Torres, had created a private path through a side entrance. Judge Caprio held Marcus's hand as they walked through the corridors, the boy's palms sweaty and trembling. "What if she doesn't recognize me?" Marcus asked suddenly, his voice small. "I was 3 years old when she left. I'm 8 now. What if I look so different that she doesn't know me?" Judge Caprio squeezed his hand. "Marcus, mothers always know their children. Always." They reached the private room where Sarah was being evaluated. Lieutenant Santos stood outside, looking exhausted but triumphant. She smiled when she saw Marcus. "She's been asking for you every 30 seconds, Santos said. "The doctors are trying to examine her, but she won't stop talking about her son." Marcus looked up at Judge Caprio. "Is it okay if I go in? Do you want me to come with you?" Marcus thought for a moment, then shook his head. I think I need to see her alone first. Just me and my mom. The way it used to be." Judge Caprio felt his throat tighten. This 8-year-old, who'd been so brave through everything, suddenly looked like the 3-year-old who'd been left alone in an apartment 5 years ago. "Of course," Judge Caprio said. "We'll all be right here. Take as long as you need." Marcus nodded. He straightened his donated shirt, pushed his glasses up on his nose and opened the door. Through the closing door, Judge Caprio caught a glimpse of Sarah Morrison-Chin sitting on a hospital bed. She was painfully thin, her dark hair streaked with premature gray, wearing a hospital gown, her left arm connected to an 4. But when she saw Marcus, her face transformed. "Marcus," she whispered. The door closed, giving them privacy. For 5 minutes, Judge Caprio and the others waited outside, hearing nothing but muffled voices and crying. Then the crying turned to laughter. The sound of a mother and son reunited after 5 years of separation, 5 years of fear, 5 years of searching. Joyce Caprio Martinez arrived, having driven back from coordinating with Massachusetts State Police. She was crying before she even reached her brother. "Frank, what you did today. Broke every rule in the book," Judge Caprio finished. "Saved 2 lives, Joyce corrected. "That's what you did. You saved that woman's life 24 years ago, and you saved it again today. And you gave that little boy his mother back." "We don't know if they'll be able to stay together," Judge Caprio said quietly. "Sarah has been living on the streets for 5 years. She'll need extensive medical treatment, psychological counseling, stable housing. Child Protective Services will need to investigate. It could be months before they're cleared for reunification." "Then we'll fight for months," Joyce said simply. "Frank, I'm taking Sarah's case. I'm going to be her social worker, her advocate, her support system. I helped her 24 years ago in rehab, and I'm going to help her now." Detective Torres joined them. "Judge, I need to inform you that Marcus Thompson is being charged with multiple felonies: parole violation, stalking, making terroristic threats, and attempted vehicular assault. He's looking at 20 to 30 years minimum. He won't be getting out to threaten anyone again." "What about the original case from 1995? Judge Caprio asked. "Can we refile charges?" "Statute of limitations has run out on most of it," Torres admitted. "But Thompson violated his parole, and the new charges are serious enough that he'll die in prison. Sarah Chin is finally safe from him." The hospital room door opened. Marcus stepped out, his face red from crying but smiling wider than Judge Caprio had ever seen a child smile. "Judge Caprio," Marcus said, "my mom wants to talk to you." Judge Caprio entered the room. Sarah Morrison-Chin looked up at him from the hospital bed, and despite the ravages of 5 years of street living, he recognized the same young woman who'd stood in his courtroom in 1995, terrified and desperate for a second chance. "Judge Caprio," Sarah said, her voice hoarse from crying, "I don't know how to thank you. Marcus told me everything: how you dismissed his charges, how you coordinated the police, how you put your career on the line to find me. I don't deserve." "Sarah," Judge Caprio interrupted gently, "you've spent 24 years believing you don't deserve good things. You didn't deserve a second chance in 1995. You didn't deserve to escape the life Thompson forced you into. You didn't deserve to have this wonderful son. But you got all those things anyway. Maybe it's time to stop asking if you deserve them and start accepting that you have them. Sarah wiped her eyes. Marcus is incredible. He told me about his investigation. About learning to drive. About stealing cars to track down leads. About hacking police databases. She laughed through her tears. He gets his stubbornness from me, but his intelligence? That's all him. He's so much smarter than I ever was. He gets his intelligence from you, Judge Caprio corrected. Sarah, you rebuilt your life from nothing. You educated yourself. You raised a child while working overnight shifts. You made decisions to protect him that cost you everything. That's not lack of intelligence. That's survival. That's love. Marcus climbed onto the hospital bed next to his mother. Sarah wrapped her arm around him, and they fit together perfectly, like two pieces of a puzzle that had been separated too long. Judge Caprio, Sarah said, I need to know what happens now. Marcus told me that you dismissed his charges, but what about me? I abandoned my child. I left him alone for 3 days before someone found him. I've been declared legally missing for 5 years. Child Protective Services isn't going to just let me walk out of here with him. No, Judge Caprio agreed, they're not. But Sarah, this isn't 1995 anymore. You're not alone this time. My sister Joyce is going to be your social worker. She'll help you navigate the system. Detective Torres has documented everything about Thompson's threats and stalking. We have evidence that you left to protect Marcus, not because you didn't want him. He pulled out his phone and showed her the letter she'd written 5 years ago. I kept your letter. I'm going to give it to Child Protective Services. It proves that you never abandoned Marcus. You sacrificed yourself for him. That's going to matter. But I'm homeless, Sarah said, her voice breaking. I don't have a job. I don't have an apartment. I have maybe $47 to my name. I can't provide for him. You're not homeless, said a voice from the doorway. Everyone turned to see Tom and Rachel Williams standing there, looking nervous but determined. Mr. and Mrs. Williams. Mr. and Mrs. Williams, Sarah said, recognizing them from Marcus's descriptions. You're Marcus's foster parents. Rachel Williams nodded, stepping into the room. We've been caring for Marcus for almost 2 years. And Chin, we need you to know, we love him. He's an extraordinary child, and it's been an honor to be part of his life. But he's not our son, Tom added. He's yours. And we've seen how hard he's fought to find you. We've seen how much he loves you. We're not going to stand in the way of that. Rachel pulled out a piece of paper. We've been talking to our lawyer. We own a 3-bedroom house in Cranston. We're willing to offer you and Marcus the guest suite, 2 connected rooms with a private bathroom, rent-free for as long as you need it. Sarah stared at them in shock. You're offering me a place to live? With my son? When you don't even know me? We know you raised an incredible kid, Tom said simply. We know you sacrificed everything to protect him. We know you spent 5 years hiding because you thought it was the only way to keep him safe. That tells us everything we need to know about who you are. But why? Sarah asked, tears streaming down her face. Why would you do this for a stranger? Rachel smiled. Because 2 years ago Marcus came into our lives. We were experienced foster parents. We'd cared for dozens of kids over the years. But Marcus was different. He was so focused on finding you that he couldn't fully engage with us, couldn't let himself be part of our family, because he was always preparing to leave. She wiped her eyes. We told him from day one, we're not trying to replace your mother. We're just taking care of you until you can go home. And he believed us. He trusted us. And in return he gave us purpose. He showed us what real love looks like, a child who never gives up searching for his mother. Tom nodded. So yes, Ms. Chin, we're offering you a place to live. Because Marcus deserves to be with his mother. And because helping reunite a family is the greatest thing foster parents can do. Marcus looked at his mother with hope in his eyes. We could be a family again, Mom. A real family. With a home. Sarah pulled Marcus closer, burying her face in his hair. I don't know what to say. I've been living on the streets for 5 years and now you're coming home, Judge Caprio said firmly. Sarah, here's what's going to happen. The hospital is going to treat your immediate medical needs, dehydration, malnutrition, any infections. That might take a few days. He looked at Joyce. My sister is going to file emergency paperwork with Child Protective Services. documenting the circumstances of your disappearance and requesting expedited reunification proceedings. We'll include Detective Torres's reports about Thompson's stalking and threats, your letter explaining why you left, and testimony from everyone involved about your dedication to Marcus." Joyce nodded. "I'll also arrange for counseling for both you and Marcus. Trauma therapy to help you process the past 5 years. It won't be easy, but we'll get through it together." Detective Torres spoke up. "I'm filing a formal report documenting that you were the victim of stalking, harassment, and threats from Marcus Thompson. That report will support your case that you left Providence to protect your son, not to abandon him. It won't erase what happened, but it will provide context." And, Tom Williams added, "Rachel and I will testify that we support reunification. We'll tell Child Protective Services that we've seen Marcus's dedication to finding you, that we believe you pose no danger to him, and that we're willing to provide temporary housing and support during the transition period." Sarah looked around the room at all these people, some strangers, some from her distant past, who had come together to help her. "Why?" she asked again. "Why are all of you doing this?" Judge Caprio sat down on the edge of the hospital bed. "Sarah, 24 years ago you asked me why I was giving you a second chance. Do you remember what I said?" Sarah thought for a moment, then shook her head. "I was too scared to remember much from that day. I told you that everyone deserves a chance to become better than their worst moment. I told you that I believed in redemption. I told you that the justice system should help people, not just punish them." He looked at Marcus, then back at Sarah. "I've spent 40 years on the bench trying to live up to those words. I've given thousands of people second chances. Some of them used those chances to turn their lives around. Some didn't. But I never regretted trying." His voice grew emotional. "Sarah, you used your second chance to become an incredible person. You got clean. You educated yourself. You worked hard. You raised a son who is brilliant, compassionate, and brave. And when you were threatened, you made the hardest choice a parent can make. You sacrificed yourself to protect him." Judge Caprio wiped his eyes. "So why are we all helping you? Because you're proof that second chances work. Because your son never gave up on you. Because reuniting a family is worth breaking every protocol in the book. And because 24 years ago, I made a promise to give you a chance to become better than your worst moment. Today, I'm keeping that promise by giving you a chance to be reunited with your son." The room was silent except for the sound of crying. Sarah, Marcus, Joyce, Rachel Williams. Even Detective Torres was wiping his eyes. "I promise I won't waste this chance," Sarah said. "I promise I'll be the mother Marcus deserves." "You already are," Marcus said, looking up at his mother. "You've always been. You just had to hide for a while. But Mom, I'm really glad you're not hiding anymore." Sarah pulled her son close, and Judge Caprio quietly stood and moved toward the door, giving them privacy. But Marcus called out, "Judge Caprio, wait." The judge turned. Marcus had pulled out his worn notebook, the one he'd filled with 5 years of investigation notes, theories, and leads. "I want you to have this," Marcus said, "as evidence. And as proof." "Proof of what?" Judge Caprio asked. "Proof that if you believe in someone enough, if you never give up, if you use your intelligence for good instead of for selfish reasons, then you can accomplish anything. Even finding your mother when everyone said she was gone forever." Marcus held out the notebook. "I read about you, Judge Caprio. I read old newspaper articles about your cases. I read about how you help people. I read about how you give second chances. And I thought, if my mom trusted him 24 years ago, then I can trust him now." The 8-year-old looked at Judge Caprio with eyes that had seen too much but still held hope. "Thank you for proving me right. Thank you for helping me find my mom. Thank you for being the kind of judge who cares more about people than about rules." Judge Caprio took the notebook with trembling hands. He opened it to the first page, where in careful child's handwriting Marcus had written, "Investigation into the disappearance of Sarah Morrison Chin, my mother. Started, June 20, 2019 when I was 3 years old. Goal, find mom and bring her home. Promise, I will never stop looking." Below that, in more recent handwriting, was a new entry. November 8, 2024. Found her. Bringing her home. Promise kept. Judge Caprio closed the notebook and looked at the mother and son reunited on the hospital bed. "Marcus," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "I'm the one who should be thanking you. You reminded me why I became a judge in the first place. Not to enforce laws but to help people. Not to maintain order but to create justice. Thank you for that reminder." He looked around the room at Joyce, at Detective Torres, at Tom and Rachel Williams, at all the people who'd come together to help. Thank you all. What we did today violated protocols, broke rules, and will probably have me answering to the Judicial Review Board for months. But I don't regret a single decision. Because today we didn't just reunite a mother and son. We proved that the system can work when people care more about human beings than about bureaucracy. 6 months later, Judge Frank Caprio stood in Providence Family Court on May 15, 2025, exactly 6 months after the day Marcus Chen had walked into his courtroom accused of car theft. But today was different. Today he was here as a witness, not as a judge. He'd retired from the bench 3 months earlier. The Judicial Review Board hadn't forced him out, but at 81 years old, he'd decided it was time to step down on his own terms. The courtroom was packed. Tom and Rachel Williams sat in the front row. Detective Torres was there. Lieutenant Santos had driven down from Massachusetts. Joyce Caprio Martinez sat beside her brother, ready to testify. And at the petitioner's table sat Sarah Morrison Chin and her 9-year-old son Marcus, dressed in his first suit, purchased for this occasion with money Sarah had saved from her new job as a janitor at Providence Public Library. The irony of working at the place where Marcus had conducted his investigation was not lost on anyone. Judge Patricia Walsh, a colleague of Judge Caprio's for 20 years, presided over the hearing. "This is a petition for formal reunification," Judge Walsh announced. Sarah Morrison Chin is seeking to regain full custody of her biological son, Marcus Chin, age 9, currently in the temporary guardianship of the state while residing with foster parents Thomas and Rachel Williams. She looked at the case file. "I've reviewed the extensive documentation in this case. The circumstances are unusual, to say the least. Chin, would you like to address the court?" Sarah stood, her hands shaking but her voice steady. "Your Honor, I'm not going to pretend that what I did 6 years ago was right. I left my 3-year-old son alone in an apartment because I was terrified. I was being stalked and threatened by a man who had abused me for years. I believed that if I disappeared, he would stop looking for my son." She looked at Marcus. "I was wrong. I should have gone to the police. I should have sought protection through legal channels. I should have trusted the system. But I didn't, because when I was young the system failed me. And I was terrified it would fail Marcus too." Sarah wiped her eyes. "But Your Honor, during the 6 months since I was found, I've learned that the system can work when people care. Judge Caprio cared enough to help my son find me. Detective Torres cared enough to reopen my case. The Williamses cared enough to offer us a home. Joyce Caprio Martinez cared enough to fight for our reunification." She pulled out a thick folder. "I've completed 6 months of intensive therapy. I've been sober for 6 months, actually 29 years and 6 months, because I never relapsed after Judge Caprio gave me my second chance in 1995. I've been employed full-time for 4 months. I've been living in stable housing provided by the Williamses. I've passed every drug test, every home inspection, every parenting evaluation." Sarah's voice grew stronger. "But most importantly, Your Honor, I've been a mother to my son. Not from a distance, not through letters or phone calls, but in person. Every single day for 6 months. I've made him breakfast. I've helped with his homework, which is way above my level because he's brilliant. I've tucked him in at night. I've been there for him the way I should have been for the past 5 years." She looked directly at Judge Walsh. "I'm asking you to make our reunification permanent. To let me be Marcus's mother again, legally and officially. Not because I've earned it. I don't think I'll ever fully earn forgiveness for leaving him. But because Marcus deserves to have his mother. And I promise you, Your Honor, I will spend the rest of my life being the mother he deserves." Judge Walsh looked at Marcus. "Marcus, do you want to address the court?" Marcus stood up, adjusting his glasses. At 9 years old, he looked younger than his intelligence suggested, but when he spoke, his wisdom was evident. "Your Honor, I'm 9 years old, so I don't know if what I say matters legally. But I want to say it anyway." Judge Walsh smiled. "What you say matters very much, Marcus." "Thank you, Your Honor. I spent 5 years looking for my mother. 5 years researching, investigating, and refusing to give up. People told me she was gone. That she'd abandoned me. That I should forget about her and move on." Marcus looked at his mother. "But I couldn't forget her. Because even when I was 3 years old, I knew my mother loved me. I had memories, vague but real, of her singing to me, feeding me, holding me when I was scared. And I knew that a mother who loved me that much didn't just disappear because she didn't care." His voice grew emotional. "I was right. My mom left to protect me. And now she's back. And for the past 6 months, we've been a family again. She makes me breakfast, Usually cereal because she's not a great cook, but she tries. She helps me with homework. Well, she tries to help, but I usually end up explaining things to her. She tucks me in at night and tells me stories about when she was young. Marcus wiped his eyes. Your Honor, my mom isn't perfect. But she's my mom. And I've spent 5 years searching for her. Please don't take her away now that I finally found her. Judge Walsh looked at the case file for a long moment. Then she looked at Tom and Rachel Williams. Mr. and Mrs. Williams, you're listed as supporting this petition. Is that correct? Tom Williams stood. Yes, Your Honor. Rachel and I have cared for Marcus for 2 years. We love him very much. But he's not our son, he's Sarah's son. And we've seen how hard Sarah has worked these past 6 months. She's proven herself as a mother. We support full reunification. Rachel added, and Your Honor, we're not going anywhere. We've told Sarah and Marcus that they're welcome to stay with us as long as they need. We've become a family, an unconventional family, but a family nonetheless. Judge Walsh nodded. Then she looked at Joyce Caprio Martinez. Caprio Martinez, you've been Ms. Chen's social worker throughout this process. What's your recommendation? Joyce stood. Your Honor, I've worked in social services for 40 years. I've seen hundreds of reunification cases. Some work, some don't. But I can say with absolute certainty, this one works. She pulled out her own thick folder. Sarah Chin has exceeded every requirement we've set. She's completed therapy, maintained sobriety, secured employment, provided stable housing. But more than that, she's rebuilt her relationship with her son. I've observed them together weekly. They have a genuine, loving bond. Marcus thrives when he's with his mother. And Sarah has proven that she's capable of putting Marcus's needs first. She's demonstrated that repeatedly. Joyce's voice grew passionate. Your Honor, 6 months ago, Sarah Chin was homeless, traumatized, and terrified. Today, she's employed, housed, and healing. That transformation didn't happen because the system worked. It happened because people cared enough to make the system work. And now we need to formalize what everyone in this courtroom already knows. Sarah and Marcus belong together. Judge Walsh reviewed the documents one more time. The courtroom waited in tense silence. Finally, she looked up. I've reviewed all the evidence, testimony, and recommendations in this case. I've considered the unusual circumstances of Ms. Chen's disappearance and the extraordinary efforts made to locate and reunify this family. She paused. It's the finding of this court that Sarah Morrison Chen has demonstrated her ability to provide a safe, stable, and loving home for her son Marcus. The trauma that led to her initial departure has been addressed through therapy and the arrest of Marcus Thompson. The concerns about her ability to care for Marcus have been alleviated through 6 months of supervised reunification. Judge Walsh picked up her gavel. Therefore, I am granting the petition for full reunification. Effective immediately, Sarah Morrison Chin is restored to full legal custody of Marcus Chin. The state's guardianship is terminated. This family is officially reunited. The gavel came down. The courtroom erupted in cheers and applause. Sarah pulled Marcus into her arms, both of them crying. Tom and Rachel Williams were hugging each other, crying too, sad to see their role as foster parents end, but joyful to see the reunification they'd supported. Joyce Caprio Martinez was sobbing openly. Detective Torres was wiping his eyes. Even Judge Walsh looked emotional as she watched the reunion. And Judge Frank Caprio sat in the gallery, tears streaming down his face, watching the end of a story that had begun 29 years earlier when a frightened 18-year-old girl had stood in his courtroom begging for a second chance. He'd given her that chance. She'd used it to build a life, to raise a son, to survive unspeakable trauma, and to fight her way back from homelessness to reclaim her family. And her son, brilliant, determined, brave Marcus, had never given up searching for her. After the hearing outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed around the family. But Sarah had only one statement prepared. 6 years ago, I made the hardest decision of my life. I left my son to protect him. I've spent every day since then praying that someday I could tell him I was sorry, that I loved him, that I never wanted to leave him. She pulled Marcus close. Today I get to tell him that every day for the rest of my life. Thank you to everyone who helped make that possible. Thank you to Judge Caprio who gave me my first second chance. Thank you to my son who never stopped looking. Thank you to the system that, when filled with people who care, can actually help families instead of breaking them apart. A reporter called out, "What's next for you and Marcus?" Sarah smiled, genuinely smiled for the first time in years. "We're going home. We're going to have dinner. We're going to do homework. We're going to be boring and normal and together. And that's all I've wanted for 5 years. Marcus looked up at his mother. Can we have pizza for dinner? We can have whatever you want, Sarah laughed. I want pizza. And I want you to tell me more stories about when you were young. And I want to work on my new investigation. Sarah's smile faltered slightly. Marcus, no more investigations. No more searching. We found each other. The case is closed. Not that kind of investigation, Marcus clarified. I want to investigate something new, how to help other kids find their missing parents. Judge Caprio helped us. Detective Torres helped us. Joyce helped us. Maybe we can help other families too. Judge Caprio, who'd been standing quietly nearby, spoke up. Marcus, that's an excellent idea. In fact, I've been thinking about exactly that. How would you and your mother like to help me start a foundation? Marcus's eyes lit up. Really? Really? We'll call it the Second Chance Foundation. We'll help families separated by trauma, abuse, or circumstances beyond their control. We'll coordinate between legal services, police departments, and social services. And we'll prove that families can heal, even after years of separation. He looked at Sarah. What do you say? Want to help turn your story into something that helps others? Sarah wiped her eyes. Judge Caprio, you've already done so much for us. And I want to do more, Judge Caprio interrupted. Sarah, I'm 81 years old. I've spent 40 years on the bench. But the best decision I ever made was giving you a second chance in 1995. Let's spend whatever time I have left giving second chances to others. Sarah looked at Marcus, who nodded eagerly. Okay, Sarah said. Let's do it. Let's help other families find their way home. 1 year later, the Second Chance Foundation held its first annual gala at the Providence Convention Center. Over 500 people attended. Judges, police officers, social workers, and dozens of families who'd been reunited through the foundation's work. Judge Frank Caprio, now 82, stood at the podium to give the keynote address. Beside him was a photograph, the same one Marcus had shown in court 2 years earlier. Sarah Morrison at age 18, standing outside Providence Municipal Court in 1995, hope alive in her eyes. This is Sarah Morrison, Judge Caprio said to the crowd. 29 years ago, she stood in my courtroom, terrified and ashamed, begging for a second chance. I gave her that chance. And she used it to become Sarah Chin, a woman who survived abuse, addiction, homelessness, and 5 years of living in fear to protect her son. He gestured to the audience where Sarah and Marcus sat together, both dressed formally for the occasion. And this is Marcus Chin, who at age 8, taught himself to drive, stole 5 cars, hacked police databases, and conducted a 5-year investigation to find his missing mother. He refused to give up. He refused to accept that his mother was gone. He refused to let the system fail him. Judge Caprio's voice grew emotional. Together, Sarah and Marcus taught me the most important lesson of my 40-year career. The system doesn't save people. People save people. When we care more about human beings than about protocols, when we're willing to break rules to do what's right, when we believe in second chances even when the odds seem impossible, that's when justice becomes more than just a legal concept. That's when it becomes real. He held up Marcus's investigation notebook, the one the boy had given him that day in court. Marcus wrote in this notebook, "Promise, I will never stop looking." And he kept that promise. He found his mother. He brought her home. He proved that love, determination, and intelligence can overcome any obstacle. Judge Caprio looked directly at Sarah and Marcus. And they proved that I was right to believe in second chances. Right to believe in redemption. Right to believe that even our worst moments don't define us. What defines us is what we do after those moments. He raised his glass in a toast. To second chances. To families reunited. To mothers who sacrifice everything for their children. To children who never give up searching. To the people who bend the rules because doing what's right is more important than following protocols. And to Sarah and Marcus Chin, proof that sometimes, the impossible is just the possible that hasn't happened yet. The crowd erupted in applause. Sarah and Marcus stood, holding hands, both crying, both smiling, both home. And Judge Frank Caprio looked out at the hundreds of people whose lives had been changed by the foundation. Families reunited, children returned to loving parents, parents given second chances to become the mothers and fathers they were meant to be, and knew that breaking those rules, violating those protocols, and risking his career had been worth it. Because in the end, justice isn't about laws. It's about love.